June 6, 1944, 07:30 hours. Sword Beach, Normandy, France. Lance Corporal Thomas Reeves, of the East Yorkshire Regiment, crouched in the surf, cold channel water, soaking through his battle dress, German machine gun fire stitching patterns in the sand around him. 50 meters ahead, a German MG42 position was shredding his company's advance, that distinctive 1,200 rounds per minute buzz, saw sound, that made men instinctively hug the ground. Thomas carried a weapon that looked, frankly, ridiculous. Top-mounted curved magazine jutting up like a shark fin, bipod legs folding awkwardly beneath the barrel. Angular, ungainly, designed by committee appearance. His mates joked it looked like something assembled from spare parts in a scrapyard. But Thomas knew something those jokes missed. This ugly gun, the Bren light machine gun, was about to prove itself the most reliable, accurate, effective infantry weapon the Allies possessed. Better than the American BR, better than the German MG34 or MG42, better than anything the Soviets fielded. Thomas deployed the bipod, nestled the stock into his shoulder, acquired the German position through the simple rear aperture sight, and squeezed the trigger. The Bren fired in smooth, controlled bursts, 5-round groups exactly as Thomas had trained. The curved magazine's top mounting meant he could watch his rounds impact, adjust aim, walk fire directly onto target without guessing where bullets went. German return fire stopped. The MG42 position went silent. Thomas' S section advanced through the gap his Bren had created. This scene repeated thousands of times across Normandy that day. British infantry sections built around the Bren gun, using its precision suppressive fire to enable advances, knock out positions, dominate tactical firefights. While American squads struggled with BRs that overheated and jammed, while German MG teams needed to relocate constantly due to their guns' ammunition hunger, Bren gunners provided steady, reliable, accurate fire that could be maintained all day without failure. The ugly gun won firefights. It saved British lives. It changed how infantry warfare worked at the tactical level. And most soldiers never understood why it was so much better than everything else. Because its advantages were engineering solutions to problems they'd never thought about. But Thomas knew. He'd carried a Bren through North Africa, Sicily, Italy, now Normandy. He'd fired it in desert heat and winter cold, through sand and mud and rain. He'd maintained it, cleaned it, trusted his life to it. The Bren never failed him. The design. The Bren gun's story began in Czechoslovakia, not Britain. The Isko-Slovenská Zbrojovka Brno Arms Factory developed the ZBVZ-26 light machine gun in the 1920s, a brilliant design that solved problems other light machine guns ignored. When Britain sought to replace their antiquated Lewis gun in the 1930s, they tested machine guns from multiple nations. American, German, French, Czech designs all competed. The Czech ZBVZ-26 won decisively, more reliable, more accurate, easier to maintain than any competitor. But Britain couldn't simply adopt a foreign weapon. National pride demanded modifications. Manufacturing capacity required the gun be producible in British factories, using British measurements and tooling. So Britain licensed the design, modified it for British .303 ammunition and imperial measurements, and manufactured it at the Royal Small Arms Factory in Enfield. BRNO plus Enfield equals Bren. The resulting weapon looked strange to soldiers, accustomed to traditional machine gun aesthetics. The magazine mounted on top rather than below, creating that distinctive shark fin profile. The gas system used a simple tilting bolt, rather than complex rotating mechanisms. The barrel could be changed quickly without tools. The bipod attached to the gas cylinder rather than the barrel. Every design choice had engineering logic. Every ugly feature solved a real problem. But soldiers initially judged on appearance, and the Bren looked wrong. Then they fired it. The Bren's accuracy was extraordinary for a light machine gun. At 600 meters, a trained gunner could hit man-sized targets with aimed single shots. The slow rate of fire, 500 rounds per minute versus the MG42's 1,200, meant recoil was manageable. Sight picture remained stable, and ammunition lasted longer. But accuracy was just the beginning. The reliability, What truly separated the Bren from every other light machine gun was its almost supernatural reliability. Military weapons must function in conditions that destroy civilian tools: desert sand, Arctic cold, tropical humidity, mud, dust, rain, snow, salt water spray, months without proper cleaning, years of hard use, dropped, dragged, submerged, fired until barrels glow red. The Bren functioned through all of it. Private James Morrison of the Rifle Brigade experienced this reliability in North Africa. His section's Bren fell from a truck during retreat, was run over by following vehicles, spent 2 hours buried in sand during a storm. When Morrison retrieved the gun, it was dented, scratched, covered in abrasive desert sand. He shook out the worst sand, ran the action several times to clear the mechanism, loaded a magazine. The Bren fired perfectly, not a single jam in the next 200 rounds. Morrison quote, "X experience wasn't unique. Bren guns submerged in rivers, buried in mud, left in monsoon rains, dropped from aircraft. They kept working with minimal maintenance. The gun's design included generous tolerances that allowed sand and dirt to pass through rather than binding the action. Critical components were overbuilt, far stronger than necessary, creating margins that absorbed abuse." German MG42 gunners envied British Brens. The MG42 was faster firing, more intimidating, tactically flexible, but it required meticulous maintenance. Sand in the action caused malfunctions. Extended firing required barrel changes every few minutes. The complex mechanisms demanded careful cleaning. The Bren was simpler, fewer parts, looser tolerances, easier maintenance. A soldier could field strip and reassemble a Bren blindfolded after minimal training. Cleaning took minutes, parts rarely broke, and when they did, replacements were simple to install. Sergeant William Cooper, weapons instructor at British infantry training depots, explained it to thousands of recruits. The Bren is your friend. It will not fail you unless you deliberately sabotage it. Other guns require care and attention like finicky women. The Bren is like a faithful dog. Feed it occasionally, treat it decently, and it will serve you loyally through anything. That reliability created tactical confidence. British infantry knew their Bren would fire when needed. Section tactics could be built around guaranteed suppressive fire. Plans didn't require contingencies for weapon failure because Bren failure was so rare, it could be ignored. American BR gunners couldn't make that assumption. Soviet DP-28 gunners certainly couldn't. Even German MG gunners, for all their weapons' excellence, experienced malfunctions often enough to plan around them. Bren gunners simply fired their weapon, and it worked. The tactical advantage. But reliability alone doesn't win battles. What made the Bren truly dominant was how its design characteristics created tactical advantages that compounded across engagements. The top-mounted magazine was considered ugly, awkward, inconvenient, but it gave Bren gunners a capability no other light machine gun provided. They could watch their own rounds impact. Most machine guns mount magazines below or to the side, blocking the gunner's view of where bullets hit. Gunners fire based on training and doctrine, hoping rounds go roughly where aimed, adjusting fire by observing dust impacts or tracer rounds. Bren gunners saw exactly where every bullet went. The top magazine left sight lines clear. British gunners could aim at specific windows, doorways, weapon slits, then watch rounds impact, adjust aim incrementally, place bullets precisely where needed. This transformed suppressive fire from area effect to precision capability. A Bren gunner could keep a German MG team's heads down by placing rounds directly at their firing port with such accuracy, they couldn't return fire. American BR gunners spraying general areas couldn't achieve the same psychological dominance. The slow rate of fire, initially criticized as a weakness, was actually an engineering triumph. At 500 rounds per minute, every trigger pull produced a 4+5 round burst that stayed on target. Recoil was manageable. Sight picture recovered between bursts. Ammunition consumption was sustainable. A 30-round magazine lasted long enough to engage multiple targets before reloading. Compare this to the MG42's 1,200 rounds per minute. Impressive, intimidating, but problematic. That rate of fire meant barrels overheated rapidly, requiring changes every few minutes during sustained engagement. Ammunition consumption was ferocious. The tactical advantage of overwhelming fire was offset by logistical nightmares supplying enough ammunition. The Bren's rate meant one gunner could maintain fire all day without running out of ammunition, or destroying his barrel through heat. British logistics could support Bren teams indefinitely. German logistics struggled to keep MG42 teams supplied during extended engagements. The quick-change barrel system was another ugliness that concealed genius. The barrel release lever looked crude. The replacement process seemed unnecessarily complicated during training. But in combat, when barrels glowed red from sustained fire, British gunners could swap in a cool barrel in seconds without tools. German gunners needed asbestos gloves and careful procedures to change MG42 barrels. BR gunners couldn't change barrels at all. When the BR overheated, it was done until it cooled naturally. Bren gunners kept firing. North Africa. The proving ground. The Bren's superiority became undeniable in North Africa, where environmental conditions destroyed weapons that looked good on parade grounds but failed under field stress. Desert warfare tested everything. Sand infiltrated mechanisms, heat expanded metal, cold desert nights contracted components, water was scarce for cleaning, dust storms buried equipment. The Bren thrived in conditions that killed other weapons. Sergeant Edward Holmes of the 7th Armored Division described a typical engagement near Tobruk, German position, maybe 400 meters distant. Their MG42 putting down impressive fire but scattered, their spraying and praying. I set up the Bren, take careful aim at their muzzle flash, fire 3 controlled bursts, 9 rounds maybe 10. Their gun goes silent, not because I hit the gunner necessarily, but because my rounds were so accurate they couldn't risk exposing themselves to return fire. That's the Bren's advantage, precision suppression, rather than volume suppression. British infantry sections in North Africa developed tactics that exploited the Bren's accuracy and reliability. The section advanced in 2 groups, Rifle Group and Bren Group. The Bren Group would establish firing position, deliver precision suppressive fire on enemy positions, allowing Rifle Group to maneuver and close with the enemy. This worked because British commanders knew the Bren would fire when needed, would hit what it aimed at, and would continue functioning regardless of conditions. Tactical plans could be built on guaranteed fire support from section-level weapons. German forces tried to capture British Brens whenever possible, not for intelligence purposes. The design was well known, but for actual use. German soldiers recognized that in desert conditions the Bren outperformed their own MG34 and MG42. One captured German report, translated by British intelligence, noted, British Bren gun shows remarkable reliability under desert conditions. Our own MGs require frequent maintenance and careful handling. British weapon continues functioning with minimal care. Recommend developing similar design for our forces. That recommendation was never implemented. German weapon development focused on rate of fire and mobile warfare doctrine. The Bren's precision and reliability didn't fit German tactical thinking, even though German soldiers in combat envied its practical advantages. The hidden engineering. What made the Bren so reliable was invisible to users, internal design choices that prevented problems before they occurred. The gas system used a simple tilting bolt locked by cam surfaces. When fired, propellant gas drove the bolt backward. A cam track tilted the bolt to unlock it, and the bolt traveled rearward extracting the spent case. A return spring drove the bolt forward, chambering a new round, and the tilting mechanism locked the bolt before firing. Simple, robust, with generous tolerances that allowed the mechanism to function even when dirty. Compare this to the German MG42's recoil-operated roller lock bolt. More complex, tighter tolerances, more parts that could fail. The MG42 was a marvel of engineering, when clean and properly maintained, but it was fragile compared to the Bren's agricultural simplicity. The barrel attachment method was another hidden triumph. The barrel locked with a simple interrupted thread collar that could be released with one hand in seconds. No tools required, no complex alignment procedures, just release, pull the old barrel forward, slide new barrel in, lock the collar, done. This simplicity meant field replacement was actually done in combat. German MG42 gunners were supposed to change barrels regularly, but the procedure was complex enough that many avoided it, accepting reduced effectiveness from overheated barrels rather than risk the exposure time required for barrel changes. Bren gunners changed barrels as routine practice during sustained fire. The magazine design, that ugly top mounting that looked so wrong, was brilliantly functional. The curved double-stack magazine fed reliably because gravity assisted the spring tension. Rounds were tilted slightly during feeding, which prevented rimlock issues that plagued straight-stack magazines. The top mounting meant that when the magazine was empty, it could be removed and replaced without disturbing the gun's position or the gunner's sight picture. Every ugly feature had engineering purpose. Every awkward-looking component solved a real problem better than conventional designs. The Bren succeeded because its designers prioritized function over form, reliability over elegance, practical field use over parade ground appearance. The Burma campaign of North Africa proved the Bren's reliability. Burma proved its versatility. Jungle warfare was the opposite of desert fighting. Humidity instead of dryness, vegetation instead of sand, close-range ambushes instead of long-range observation. The Bren adapted to jungle conditions as easily as it had mastered deserts. Private Robert Chen of the Chindits carried a Bren through Burma's jungles during deep penetration raids behind Japanese lines. His experience illustrated how the weapon functioned under extreme conditions. We were weeks behind enemy lines, no resupply, monsoon rain daily, rivers to cross, mud everywhere. My Bren was submerged multiple times. I couldn't properly clean it. We barely had time to sleep, let alone detailed weapons maintenance. But whenever we encountered Japanese forces, the Bren fired perfectly. I'd shake water out of the mechanism, let it drain for a minute, and it would work. Our American liaison officer carried a burr that jammed constantly in those conditions. He eventually just carried it as dead weight and used his carbine instead. The Bren's functioning in monsoon conditions was extraordinary. Rust should have destroyed it. Water in the mechanism should have caused malfunctions. But the generous tolerances meant water drained away. The simple mechanism continued functioning even when wet, and the robust construction resisted environmental damage that destroyed more delicate weapons. Japanese forces tried to capture British Brens whenever possible, recognizing their superiority over Japanese light machine guns. The Japanese Type 96 and Type 99 light machine guns were adequate weapons, but their complex mechanisms and tight tolerances made them vulnerable to jungle conditions. Japanese soldiers knew that a captured Bren would work regardless of conditions. British forces in Burma built their tactics around guaranteed Bren reliability. Patrols could operate for weeks knowing their primary firepower would function when needed. Ambush positions could be established with confidence that the Bren would fire on command. Defensive positions didn't require redundant weapons to compensate for potential failures. The psychological effect was significant. British soldiers knew their weapon would work. Japanese soldiers knew British positions were anchored by reliable firepower. Combat outcomes often reflected this confidence differential. British forces willing to engage because their Bren would perform. Japanese forces cautious because they knew British machine gun fire would be accurate and sustained. D-Day and beyond. By D-Day, the Bren was the proven foundation of British infantry tactics. Every infantry section built around its Bren gun. Tactics assumed the Bren would suppress enemy positions while riflemen maneuvered. Training emphasized the Bren's precision and reliability as section-level artillery. But this was the first time massed British forces equipped with Brens would face the full might of German defenses in France. The weapon that had proven itself in North Africa and Burma now faced its ultimate test: sustained combat against Germany's best units defending Fortress Europe. The test validated everything British forces had learned. Bren guns performed flawlessly during the Beaches assault, the bocage fighting, the breakout battles, all the way to Germany's surrender. Lance Corporal Thomas Reeves, who we met on Sword Beach, carried his Bren through 11 months of combat from Normandy to the Elbe River. During that time, he fired approximately 15,000 rounds through the same weapon. He never experienced a single malfunction that wasn't caused by a damaged magazine. American forces, observing British tactics during joint operations, often requested British Bren teams for support rather than relying on their own burrs. German prisoners, when questioned about British infantry capabilities, consistently mentioned British machine gun fire as more concerning than American automatic weapons, not because of volume, but because of accuracy and reliability. By war's end, the Bren had proven itself the most effective infantry light machine gun in Allied service. Not the fastest firing, not the highest capacity, not the most technologically advanced, but the most reliable, accurate, maintainable, and tactically useful weapon in its class. The post-war testament,
The Bren's superiority wasn't just wartime opinion. Post-war analysis confirmed what soldiers had experienced. A 1946 British military study examined weapon reliability across all theaters. The Bren showed a malfunction rate of less than 1 per 10,000 rounds fired. The American Burr showed approximately 1 malfunction per 3,000 rounds. The German MG42, despite its technical brilliance, showed 1 malfunction per 5,000 rounds under field conditions. The Bren was literally 3 times more reliable than the next best Allied weapon, and twice as reliable as Germany's best machine gun. But reliability statistics don't capture the full picture. The Bren's accuracy and controllability meant that British sections could engage targets with confidence that rounds would impact where aimed. This psychological advantage, knowing your weapon would hit what you shot at, translated into tactical dominance at the section level. The Bren continued serving the British military for decades after WWII. It saw action in Korea, Malaya, Kenya, Cyprus, Suez, Borneo, Aden, Northern Ireland, and the Falklands. Modified versions served into the 1990s. The design was so fundamentally sound that it remained relevant through 50 years of military evolution. Compare this to the BAR, which was phased out by the late 1950s as inadequate for modern warfare, or the German MG42, which was excellent but required the industrial capacity and logistical support that only Germany's military could provide, or Soviet weapons, which were adequate but never approached the Bren's combination of reliability and accuracy. The ugly gun outlasted them all because it did what soldiers actually needed weapons to do: work reliably under terrible conditions, hit targets accurately, and require minimal maintenance while doing it. The veteran's verdict: ask any British soldier who carried a Bren in combat, and the response is consistent. It was the best weapon they used during the war. Not the most exciting, not the most impressive looking, not the weapon you'd choose for dramatic photographs, but the weapon you wanted when combat actually happened. Sergeant William Cooper, who trained thousands of soldiers on the Bren during WWII, summarized it perfectly in a 1985 interview. Recruits always made jokes about the Bren's appearance. Top-mounted magazine looked ridiculous. Bipod seemed flimsy. The whole thing looked like it was designed by someone who'd never seen a proper machine gun. Then we'd take them to the range, let them fire it, and the jokes stopped. They realized the Bren hit exactly what you aimed at, worked regardless of conditions, and never let you down. By the time they finished training, every recruit wanted to be the section Bren gun. It was the weapon everyone trusted. That trust was earned through performance. In desert sand and jungle mud, on European battlefields and Pacific islands, in conditions that destroyed other weapons, the Bren worked. It fired when soldiers needed it to fire. It hit what soldiers aimed at. It kept working when proper maintenance was impossible. The weapon's ugliness was the price of its excellence. Every awkward feature served a purpose. Every design choice that looked wrong solved a real problem. The Bren succeeded because its designers cared more about function than appearance, more about reliability than aesthetics, more about soldiers' survival than weapons reviewers' opinions. The closing. The Bren gun won no beauty contests. Military historians studying photographs find it ungainly and awkward. Modern weapons enthusiasts prefer more elegant design. The top-mounted magazine, the angular construction, the utilitarian appearance, none of it impresses people, judging on aesthetics. But aesthetics don't win firefights. British infantry sections dominated tactical engagements throughout WWII because their Bren gunners provided accurate, reliable, sustained suppressive fire that enabled maneuver and destroyed enemy positions. That dominance came from engineering choices that prioritized function over form. The ugly gun was ugly because it was designed by engineers who understood that beauty in weapons comes from reliability, that elegance emerges from simplicity, and that the best weapon is the one that works when you need it to work. The Bren worked, always, everywhere, under conditions that destroyed weapons designed to look impressive on parade grounds. That's why British soldiers trusted it. That's why German soldiers wanted to capture it. That's why it served the British military for 50 years after the war ended. The ugly gun was beautiful where it mattered, in the hands of soldiers who needed a weapon they could trust with their lives, and it never failed them.